Welcome to this program. This is taking a closer look at the news. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe, like, share widely, and comment on this video. Give us the thumbs up as well. All right, so in this edition then, we're looking at how Africa voted at the recent United Nations resolution to condemn Russia for the invasion of Ukraine. Now, Africa has had a very warm relationship in the grand scheme of things with Russia. And we know about the Russia-African Summit, where African leaders flocked to Moscow to interact with Russian officials, including Putin himself. And Russia, in turn, has had trade relationships with the continent. And in some cases, even military relationships or assistance to various countries on the continent. Now, it's important to understand the African vote within the context of this relationship. And that's why we want to look at this particular event and understand how that relationship impacted Africa's vote. Now, take a look at this now. 54 countries on the continent and 54 countries part of the United Nations. Out of these 54, just barely half voted for the resolution. And voting for the resolution here means voting to condemn Russia for the invasion of Ukraine. 28 countries. And one would think that in spite of the blatant aggression of Russia against an independent sovereign nation without provocation, you will have more African countries saying, wait a minute, we can't stand for this, we have to condemn it. But not so. So 28 African countries voting for the resolution. That means there's a lot of African countries out there that either did not vote, abstained, or voted against the resolution. So let's take a closer look at this. All right, so out of the 28 is Nigeria. In the 28 is Nigeria, which is the most populated country on the continent and the country with the largest economy. And that means a lot of African countries look up to this country in terms of the policy direction, in terms of how it will vote. And 28 countries stood for Ukraine, essentially. Now, what is interesting is the other countries that did not vote for the resolution, but let's take a look at the countries that abstained. Now, 17 countries abstained from the resolution. Now, in terms of the world, a total of 35 countries abstained globally, 35, and 17 of those 35 were African countries. And amongst the 17, you find Algeria. Very interesting. You find Algeria, an oil-producing country. You will find Angola, another oil-producing country. And then you also find South Africa, which is a huge country, a country with a very powerful economy on the continent, a very developed country, relatively speaking, abstaining from the vote. So essentially, they are saying we're not going to condemn Russia. We're not going to approve or disapprove of the action. Now, let's take a look at the reason why South Africa said they are abstaining from the vote. According to the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, he said, and I quote, the resolution, the United Nations resolution, did not foreground the call for meaningful engagement between Ukraine and Russia. It did not call for it. That's what he said. That the resolution did not go far enough to call for engagement, interactions, negotiations between the two parties. And then he goes on to say, it does not provide the encouragement and international backing that the parties need to continue their efforts, right? And so for this, unquote, and for this reason, South Africa abstained from the vote. And now this is very interesting because as a leading country on the continent, for it to take this position is very disappointing. It's extremely disappointing. And South Africa ought to have shown, led by example, because South Africa itself had been through a lot of turmoil with apartheid, in place for decades, with the ANC fighting for freedom, and so it knows a thing or two about oppression. It knows a thing or two about social injustice. And it was South Africa's Archbishop Desmond Tutu, may his soul rest in peace, who said that the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. If the elephant is stepping on its tail and you say you will do nothing about it. And that's exactly what South Africa has done with this vote. The elephant is on the tail of Ukraine and South Africa has done nothing about it. Not even a condemnation. And that is the interesting and very disappointing aspect of this vote, of the South African vote. All right, so now, but on the other hand, amongst the 28 that voted for the resolution is Kenya. And Kenya, as we know, is one of the leading countries in the world in terms of export of tea, in terms of tourism, one of the leading countries on the continent as well in terms of economic capacity and growth. So the Kenya ambassador to the United Nations, Ambassador Martin Kimani, strongly condemned the Russian action, offering harsh criticism of the invasion. And he said, I quote, we reaffirm Kenya's respect for the territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders, unquote. So Mr. Kimani essentially is saying, is saying that this is wrong, that Kenya as a country condemns this action, the Russian action, that is, and has gone as far as saying that Russia violated the territorial integrity of Ukraine, which is a sovereign nation, has been a sovereign nation since 1991, when the Soviet Union disintegrated. And many of the countries that we have today in that area came from the former Soviet Union, and Ukraine was one of them. And Ukraine, having a lot of nuclear weapons at the time, had to hand over those weapons to Russia at the time of independence. So Kenya has condemned the invasion. Nigeria has condemned the invasion. But the other country, South Africa, did not condemn the invasion. And the other countries that did not submit the votes, which is different from abstaining, are also interesting to note what those countries are. For example, Ethiopia did not submit a vote, and Cameroon did not submit a vote as well. And Ethiopia is one of the biggest countries. As a matter of fact, is the second largest country in the continent with a strong economy as well, with a thriving aviation industry. 8 African countries did not submit a vote. Amongst them is Morocco as well. Morocco, a very powerful country with a very strong economy, did not submit a vote. Only one African country voted against the resolution and sided with Russia. And that country is Eritrea. And Eritrea, once again, just like South Africa, having been through war of independence from Ethiopia, ought to understand the meaning of oppression and aggression. But then you have to put their vote within the context of their relationship with Russia and understand why they voted that way. And Eritrea, by voting against the resolution, joined only 3 other countries that voted against the resolution: Belarus, which was a given, North Korea, and Syria. All voted against the resolution and sided with Russia, saying Russia did well. And why is this important? It's important because Africa has a lot of interaction with Ukraine and Russia as well. As a matter of fact, a lot of African students are in Ukraine. 8,000 Moroccans students in Ukraine, most of them, or some of them in the medical school. 4,000 Nigerian students in Ukraine, most of them in postgraduate programs and in medical school. And $4 billion in exports from Ukraine to Africa. That's what's at stake. That's what's at stake for Africa. A lot of trade interactions between Ukraine and Africa, and a lot of educational partnership between Ukraine and Africa as well. And if the war goes on, then all of that is jeopardized. And African students, most of them have already returned home. That means their studies have been interrupted. And trade certainly will be interrupted as well. Now, even though Russia is a huge military player and a huge economic player, it's very important for African countries to call a spade a spade. But again, we're in a world where the political interest of these countries take precedence. In political science, there is this maxim that goes, no country has permanent friends, but permanent interest. And that's what is at play here. Permanent interest, countries take a look at their permanent interest and side and vote on that aspect. And vote on their permanent interest. And that's what has happened in this vote, where 28 African countries voted for the resolution out of 54, and the rest either abstained. 17 out of the 54 abstained from this vote, and that 17 is almost 50% globally of the countries, 35 countries that abstained. Now, this is very interesting and curious as well. All right, so it's important for us to keep this vote within context, especially the vote, the lone vote by Eritrea. Why Eritrea voted this way? Largely because of its alliance with Russia and its interaction with that country, its trade interaction with that country, and accepting military aid over time for that country in its struggle against Ethiopia. And siding with Russia at the time when it believes that Russia actually needs a favor. So tell us what you think about the African vote. Leave your comments in the comments section. And once again, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video widely.